This is Average Joe Finances Podcast, episode 14.
Desire is ground zero. Like that's where everything else will spring from. And if we don't have sufficient desire, in this case, for more money, then we're not going to do what we need to do to get the money that we want. Why? Because we don't want it badly enough.
Welcome to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Are you trying to get out of debt, invest, or just not sure where to start? Then this is the place for you. We discuss different ways to get out of the rat race and build your wealth. Join us on this wild ride to financial freedom.
Hey, if you're watching this video on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button and click subscribe. Also, if you're listening to this as a podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our newest episodes. Be sure to check us out on all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn. All the links are in the description below. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So today I had an awesome interview. I spoke with James Goy Jr. for about 3 hours. We recorded about 2.5 hours of this conversation, and we go over his book, How to Attract Money Using Mindpower, and we go through it chapter by chapter, right? It's a pretty short read. He sent it to me. I was able to read through the whole thing and read through the different lesson plans, and I got to say it's some pretty good information. So for those of you that don't really follow the metaphysical or the spiritual side of things, it might be a little bit too much for you, but at the same time, there's some tried and true techniques and methods that he goes over in his book too that kind of separate from that. One of them being something that I practice all the time, and that's affirmations, right? So we'll get to that when we get to chapter 10. I'm not sure it'll be in this first episode in the series because it's going to be a 3-part breakdown since it was 2.5 hours. It's a lot to digest. So I really hope you guys enjoy this interview. And just another disclaimer here. My microphone was off again, like I talked about with my last episode last week with Dr. Sean Woodley, is the fact that I did not realize with the Zoom update, it disconnected my mic. So again, there'll be some more clearing throats that you'll hear. And it's actually during this interview when I heard an echo of myself that I realized when I thought my mic was muted, that it in fact was not, because it was picking up off the laptop mic. With that being said, get that out of the way now. I really hope you guys enjoy this first episode of this 3-part series. Check it out. All right. Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Mike Cav with Average Joe Finances. And today's guest, we have James Goi Jr. So James is the Attract Money Guru. He's the best-selling author of How to Attract Money Using Mindpower, a book that set a new standard for concise, no-nonsense, straight-to-the-point self-help books. He condenses and simplifies abstract metaphysical concepts and powerful success principles, making this life-changing information accessible to everyone. So far, James has written 11 books. You can see James in the groundbreaking docudrama, Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. James, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you too, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So I'd like to start things off. I gave you a little bit of an intro, but I'd like for you to share a little bit about your story. If you could tell us who you are, how you got to where you are today, and just how the journey got started.
Certainly. Well, I was born and raised basically in New Jersey. And as a young child, really, I started having some experiences, otherworldly type things, out-of-body experiences, and seeing ghosts, at intervals and things like that. So I was primed very early. I knew that there was more to life than most people seem to know or talk about. But so I grew up. I ended up coming to California when I was 19 years old. And I still hadn't had any knowledge or read any books on, my subject matter, mind power, spirituality, metaphysics, and things of that nature. But within the first few years in California, I started to find those types of books, that type of information, and it really just transformed my life, because as soon as I started reading from this material, I immediately recognized that this was what I this was the missing ingredient. This is what, one of the key elements that had been missing from life, that I intuitively felt there was a lot more to life than other people knew about or were telling me about anyway, or that I'd ever heard of. And so this was one of the keys, and specifically the fact of, what do you want to call it, the law of attraction or mind power or whatever, but that our thoughts as human beings not only affect our own abilities and actions and habits, but they go out from us and have an effect in the outer world. And one of the early ways that, and one of the early books I read was Think and Grow Rich. And so I knew that this could be used for specifically to attract money. And that was always my great need, money. And so I, started using it in those ways and other ways. And within the first few years, I started teaching in little metaphysical bookshops around San Diego County, and I lived and taught over in Sedona, Arizona for a while. And one thing I found very interesting is that people would ask me, they'd say, well, I've been studying this stuff for a long time, and I've even used it to get, the home of my dreams or the relationship I wanted or whatever. But why doesn't this work for money? And I thought that was an odd question, because first of all, if it works for anything, it works for everything. And second of all, I had used it. So I knew absolutely that it worked for money. And so that's what eventually led me to write the book. I wanted to have a go-to source. You've read the book, so it's very concise, it's easy to read, yet it's very well researched. I quote 160 other separate authors from separate books. But also it's a manual, like there's no fluff. So I wanted people, because I know most people who buy a self-help book, they only read the average is I think from what I've heard, 3 chapters, and they don't follow through. And I've read, 200-300 page books, and I'm like, oh man, I always notice you could have made this easier on me. Like you could have made this shorter and still given me all the information. And that's what I wanted to provide, that go-to source, that one easy to assimilate and understand and apply manual for the specific subject of using mind power to attract money. And that book, hit a chord with people. It's still the book I'm most asked to talk about and that I'm most excited to talk about today. Number one, it's the easiest book for me to talk about. I spent so many years, reading all these books, researching, collecting quotes, and some of my newer books are more spiritual and came around in ways it's really deep stuff that is harder to put in words. But for this particular subject in this book, it's very easy to explain the principles and the concepts and the techniques for applying them to do this attracting money with mind power. So that's one reason it's my favorite book to talk about still. But another reason is, and especially now, but at all times, money is a challenge for many people. And I feel that if we can help them fulfill that need and meet that, close that gap a little from what they need or want and what they have, then they're more open to, to be able to grow and learn in other areas. But if we don't have enough and if we're struggling day to day, it's really hard to put our minds on anything else. So it's more survival and not thrival. And I like to help people thrive as well. But I understand if they don't have the finances where they can relax and have the presence of mind to think beyond, their daily grind, then they're not going to be able to do it. So the money will help them do that.
All right, fantastic. That's a great opening and intro for us to learn a little bit about you and what it is you're doing. There's some things I like to take notes while I'm doing this. And there's one big thing that you said that really stuck out to me is that how money is a challenge for many people. And that if they're in survival mode, it's very hard to get your mind in a good place to focus on being able to make money and better your situation, right? So I think that's very important, and we're probably going to touch on that as we talk about your book here. So you said you started having these experiences as a child, right? Can you describe that a little bit more? Like what is it that you felt in those moments as a child? Do you think that's one of the things that led you to go on this journey that you went on now and set you on this path?
Well, I think my early experiences helped me to be more open when I finally found the Mindpower material, just knowing that there was more to life than meets the eye. I was just sensitive as a child and could see, at times presences and feel them. And, now it's a daily part of my life. We have people visit us all the time that we've known but are now deceased. We had at least one today. I mean, it's like every day. For years. And the other thing, though, from my childhood is I started having out-of-body experiences. I would wake up at night in my room and think I was awake. I wouldn't know for many years later what was happening, but I would wake up and think I was awake and sitting on my bed, but I was actually asleep in my sleeping body. So that led to, later on studying and practicing and getting better at out-of-body projection, astral travel, lucid dreaming, and things of that nature. I just had a lucid dream. I'm not working on having them. I don't know if you know what lucid dreaming is, but it's basically you're in a normal dream and then you realize you're dreaming. And it changes everything because now you have unlimited power. You can do whatever you want. Nothing can hurt you, and you know this. So I just had one the night before last, just spontaneously. There's ways to induce them and to incubate them and to make it more. But most of the time, I'm not really working on that. But I have several a month probably just because they just happen. But certainly those understandings started in early life, and I started having my first experiences of divine intervention as a child, but I didn't know what they were at the time. Just to give you an example, one time I was in grammar school. I don't know, one of the lower grades in grammar school. It was a Friday night in our little town in New Jersey, and me and a little friend of mine were out on the main street, and there was this girl from school. She was a couple of grades older, and she was quite a big girl. And I had said something to her, probably making fun of her, being fat or whatever. And she started chasing me, and I ran out into the street and got hit by a car. A very big old, this is back in the early 60s, this would be, I guess. And so I actually flew over the other lane of traffic and landed on the sidewalk. Only I was more like placed on the sidewalk. And later on, when I came to understand, just the laws of physics, inertia and momentum and gravity and things, when a vehicle's coming at you and hits you, you don't fly off in a third direction, like you go under the car or you're pushed forward or something. And so I did have bruises everywhere where the car made contact with me, but there were no other injuries. And I flew quite a distance and was set on the sidewalk. And when my friend ran 2 blocks to where we lived to get my mother, and she ran around the house for 2 minutes looking for the car keys, and then ran out of the house and forgot the car. But she ran the distance 2 or 3 blocks to the site of the accident. When she got there, a priest was leaning over me. Everyone who saw what happened thought I have to be dead. I flew all this. And so I've had a lot of other experiences since then. So that, even though you don't know it at the time, that, wow, that was really strange. That things don't happen like that. I mean, how come I went this way and not that way? How come I was bruised from where the car hit, but had no indications of when I slammed to the ground from flying through the air and hitting the sidewalk? But I didn't know those things in my conscious mind as a child, but that still went into the mix of helping me on a subconscious level to understand that there. And so all of these things just led to, when I finally found my initial material, and of course I branched out from there a lot more spiritual and metaphysical, and of course studied lucid dreaming, quantum physics, out of body, astral travel, everything. But the first books were more on the Mindpower, metaphysics, law of attraction. That's the first books I started finding, the very first few. And I was just primed for it, ready for it. I knew intuitively there was a lot more to know than I knew. I knew nobody else I knew it. And when I finally started to find that material, it was, and I just started collecting every book I could find on the subject. And from there, then, life went along, and I ended up writing that first book, and now a bunch more. I got a couple more ready to come out pretty soon now.
Yeah, from there, the rest was history.
As they say.
Okay, very interesting. So also part of what you talked about when you moved from New Jersey to California, right? And you started finding these books on these spiritual, metaphysical books and just learning all of that. How much time did it take for you to study everything, learn that topic before you started giving these lessons and classes in the bookshops that you explained earlier?
Right. Well, I don't remember exactly because I, wasn't writing it on a calendar or anything. But I will guess and say, let's see, just a couple of short years. I mean,
Okay.
not a lot of time, but I was really immersed in the study part of it. Maybe it could have even been 3 or 4, maybe. Probably
Okay.
more like it. Yeah, somewhere in there.
So
But it was
between the studying, right? So between the studying and then also the experiences that you had earlier in life, you were in a good spot where you felt like you could help other people.
Right. And when I started teaching, I found a very interesting thing, which now takes place in my writing. But, and when I was doing the lectures and things, I was doing them with my life partner, Kathy. She's a natural born medium. I mean, she can, she's a medium. She's natural born. She was seeing all the dead people when she was a little girl and whatnot. They were her friends. But what I found out when I started doing the lecturing was that I'd be driving home with Kathy and I'd be saying like, did you hear what I said about such and such? Like, that's really fascinating. But I don't know that. Like, I never heard that. I never read that. And so while I was teaching, stuff was coming out of my mouth that I didn't know. And as I was saying it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is really fascinating. I didn't say, oh, wow, this is brand new. And, I just talked like I just integrated with another part of myself that does know this. And as I was endeavoring to teach what I knew, I was actually learning more that I didn't know and teaching that in the process. And that happens in my writing now too, my newer writings. This book here, How to Attract Money Using Mindpower, my first book, is basically research, study, and years of application to really have a visceral feel for what all of this is and what it means and how it works, even though I don't have my personal experiences in the book because it is a manual. There were a lot, tons, 6-figure windfalls and all kinds of things. But it's just, it kind of, the newer books is much more like when I used to speak in a more spiritual vein, not just on the book. When I was speaking about the book and the principles in the book, then it was, it's all my study. It's all everything I've assimilated and in my own personal experience and teaching that. But the other stuff is hard. And that's one reason why I say this is still my favorite book to talk about, because the other books are very hard to talk about. Like, because when I wrote one book on the concept of divine order, and I wrote the book in one day. Like, my first book took me 9 years, start to fix, in 6, 4, 2, I think. And then this book came through in one day. I didn't plan to write it. I woke up one morning and I thought, it's a little process I explained in the preface, but the book just kind of was there. And I've had that happen. At least 1 or 2 of my books, I sat down to write a short little article on something, and then I'm looking and it's like, wow, this is too much for that. And I'm saying, well, this isn't even what I was going to write. Oh, wow, this is a book. The God Function is an example. I got an idea. I have hundreds of, on little pieces of paper, I think they're 3 by 2 inches, I think, hundreds of titles that have come to me of books that I like to write. And one day I was writing something and then I realized it's that God Function thing, because I had this title came to me, The God Function. I had no idea what that was. Like, what is it? I thought that sounds like a great title for a book, but what the heck is it? And then one day I was sat down to write something else, and I found myself writing that book, The God Function. And that's one of the books I think that was written in a very short time. So the other books are, the more I get comfortable with them or whatever, the more I can talk about them a little easier. But this book and this subject matter, I can talk about it all day. The other stuff is a little harder to bring down into words, because it came to me, some of it didn't come to me through conscious mind and study. It just kind of came to me. And that's the stuff that's a little, and also some of the more obscure or outside the box principles of the true nature of reality and things like that. Those things are hard. They get harder to put into words so people can understand what you're trying to relate.
I think what you do is, you're doing what a lot of people do when they get their ideas and they wake up, they get it, they write it down right away, right? You're actually getting the titles for future books that you haven't even started writing yet. You get it, you write it down, and then one day it comes to you, and that's pretty cool. The fact that you wrote the title down for that book, and then I don't know how much longer later that you just started typing and it came out. That's pretty neat.
Well, it's interesting that I come up with the title first, but it's also interesting that, like, on that one book, I have no idea what it means. I don't know what it is, but there is in fact a God function, but I didn't really know that when I wrote down that title. And so
Wow.
it's a fascinating process for me to be right, in the middle of it.
Yeah. So your first book, so that was the one, that one came to you kind of quick, but your first book, you said it took you 9 years to write.
And I hasten to say that was on and off,
Right.
with months at a time of not writing, life. We moved around between states, even over to Hawaii and whatnot, and a lot of study in there. But yes, from when I wrote the first working title and first page or two to when I published, it was 9 full years. Yeah.
Right. That's fair, right? Life happens, there's always moving parts. And you talk about that a little bit in your book on how to, I guess, kind of guide your life in that direction, right? So I just finished reading your book last night, right? Because we only scheduled this a couple days ago, and you sent me the copy, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's take a quick break from today's episode to hear from our show sponsors. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Mike Cav from Average Joe Finances. Just want to talk to you today about Prep Agent. If you're interested in learning how to become a real estate agent and being able to pass the test on your first try, check out Prep Agent at www.prepagent.com. Use code AVGJOE, that's Average Joe, AVGJOE, to get an additional 20% off. Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Mike Cav with Average Joe Finances. We're living in some pretty tough times right now, and if you don't have life insurance, you should probably get it. You need to protect yourself, protect your family, and protect what you own. Check out the link below in the show notes or in the video description. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Do not use this for any real estate or investment making decisions. All views by myself or our guests are solely our own and do not reflect the opinion of our employers. Welcome back, everybody. Let's get back into it.
You're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Whether it's single or multifamily real estate, the stock market, or side hustles, we discuss it all. Strap in and enjoy the ride.
So your book comes with 20 different chapters, right? And each chapter has a section that has lessons, right? I didn't have a chance to go through and do the 3x5 cards and do all the little lessons, but I was able to read all the content. And the content of your book is really good stuff. And I want to talk about the 20 topics that you have here. If we could talk about the first topic of desire. In this particular chapter, right? I'm actually going to turn to it right here. So if you could share with us on this particular chapter, what sticks out to you? What made you write it this way?
Right. Well, as you know, I have my self-imposed word limits or chapter limits. So in Concepts and Counsel, where I actually explain the subject in my own word, just as in the other 19 Concepts and Counsel sections, it's one page. So I challenged myself to, in one page, explain everything that you need to know about the subject to deliver on the title, How to Attract Money Using Mindpower. So when I first started, the book was larger. I think it was, each of those was 2.5 pages. And I actually tightened them way down to the one page. But it's very telling or indicative of what you said, that it seems to be in a logical order or whatever, because desire is the first chapter for a reason. And let me read a quote that I open each chapter with a quote, and then I end with 7 more, so 8 times.
Yes, I saw that on your YouTube channel too. When you
Right.
actually, I watched all those videos as well. You looked much different, nice and clean shaven.
Right.
But yeah, that was really neat too, because you go into detail for each chapter, and I'm going to make sure I share that channel in the page notes as well. But I'll let you continue.
Right. Yeah, those were quite a while back, but I did a video for each of the chapters, and they're about 10 minutes more or less, 7 to 10 minutes or so each.
That's back when YouTube had that limit. There was like a 10 or 12 minute limit on videos. So
Right. And but I opened the chapter on desire with a quote from Robert Collier from The Secret of the Ages, 1926. And he wrote, desire is the great moving power of the mind, that which excites into action the will and powers of the individual. It is at the bottom of action, emotion, or expression, end quote. So that is a great quote. Of course, that's why I use it as the opening quote, because it really shows us that desire is ground zero. Like, that's where everything else will spring from. And if we don't have sufficient desire, in this case for more money, then we're not going to do what we need to do to get the money that we want. Why? Because we don't want it badly enough. So desire is the first chapter. It's really the first step, is increasing your desire if that's necessary, so that you'll be motivated and impelled. You won't have to push yourself. You'll be pulled along into the process to learn what you have to learn, to do what you have to do to be able to get what you want to get. And that's why it's the first chapter. It's a pivotal chapter, and everything else springs from this. Everything else will happen because you increase your desire for more money.
Having that desire, that want, right, is I think everybody wants more money, right? Everybody has that desire for more money, no matter what your situation is. There's always room to push yourself to get more. Now, some people could be financially free and perfectly happy, and they've already done that, then they're good to go. But for those, my listeners and everything, there's a reason why we call it Average Joe Finances, right? And this is your typical everyday blue collar worker, doing their 9 to 5 in the rat race, just trying to make ends meet and save up enough money to retire, hopefully by the age of 65 or sometimes later. So that particular base definitely has that desire to get more money and to get themselves in a better place. So your next chapter, which is belief, I'd like to talk about that, right? Because if you have the desire, the next step is believing that you can get there. So if you could please share with us.
Certainly. And I'll start with this quote also that I opened that chapter with, from Claude M. Bristol, The Magic of Believing, 1948, which is one of the early books I read, and that had an influence on me, or I'll say an impact on me. But it's called The Magic of Believing. And quote, belief changes the tempo of the mind or thought frequency. Like a huge magnet, it draws the subconscious forces into play, changing your whole aura and everything about you, including people and objects at great distances. And I love this quote because it speaks to, like any psychologist, psychiatrist can tell you that our subconscious mind is going, and our beliefs about ourselves, for instance, are going to affect our habits and our personality and our abilities and just what we can do even. our aptitudes. But in this quote here, affecting everything about you, including people and objects at great distances, we learn there's so much information and teaching and power in this one simple quote, because most people don't, historically, human beings, most have not understood that their mind, what they think and what they feel, actually goes out from them and has an effect on other people's thoughts and actions and feelings, on circumstances, on conditions, on events as they unfold. Our minds as individual human beings, well, first of all, here's a great point to let everybody know that, guess what? We're all doing this all the time. Everyone is using mind power all the time and having an effect on their world. What happens for them, what happens to them, what happens around them. Most people don't understand it, and they don't understand the process. When you understand the process, you know it's taking place, then you can harness it by learning how it works and in working in harmony with it. So that's one of the foundational understandings of why belief itself is so powerful. So once we have the desire to be able to have a strong urge and desire for attract this extra or higher financial abundance than we have, now we want to start to develop the belief that it is actually possible, because it's the belief in the thing which is the precursor to the thing.
One of the things I liked about this part of the book is this is where the first part where you start talking about the subconscious, right? You dive deeper into that as we get further into the next couple chapters, but I want the people that are listening to this right now to understand, listen to the words when we talk about subconscious, right? Because the things that you put in the back of your mind that you're tucking away in your brain will have an effect on the choices and decisions that you make in the future. And James talks about that in the rest of in the next couple chapters. The very next one, right? And this, of course, these all segue perfectly into each other, right? You go from belief to expectancy. And as we go into expectancy, it's the things that you're believing. And I know you're going to talk about this too. I don't want to step on your toes, but the manifestation of your belief, right? So I'm going to let you talk a bit to that when we talk about expectancy.
Well, expectancy is the next logical step to belief. Regarding the future, when we try to develop belief that certain things are going to happen in the future, well, when we develop that belief to a high enough degree, it naturally evolves or morphs into expectancy. We actually now not only believe something's going to happen, but we expect it to happen. And that's crossing one of those lines where it puts you in a whole new powerful platform. Because what we expect, I opened this chapter with a quote from Rhonda Byrne from The Secret, 2006. Expectation is a powerful, attractive force because it draws things to you. Very short, very simple, no frills, but it says it all. Expectation is a powerful, attractive force because it draws things to you. So what we come to expect is what we will come to get, for the most part, over time. And that's why we want to look and see, is what I'm expecting what I would like to have happen, or what I like for more than that to happen? Because if we think about it, the kinds of things that we expect to happen, let's say in our financial life, in our future, when we retire or 5 years from now, the kind of thing we expect to happen, by definition, we're assuming will happen. And through common sense, we'll start preparing for that to happen and living as if that's going to be. But it's all mind power. And so we are it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so the great thing is that when we understand the process, we can now start to identify where our expectations are falling short of our desires. If we really thought we could have such and such, like if we're 20 and we're looking ahead to when we're 30, if we really thought that we could have more than we're now expecting, and now we know the power of expectation, well, we can work at increasing our desire, our belief, and our expectancy. And so now we're on a whole new track. Now we're attracting a different financial future to us 10 years out or 20 years out or whatever the case may be.
Awesome. So before we move on to the next step, this was one of the first ones. So I read through your simple steps, right? But this particular step was one of the first ones that stuck out to me, right? Because I like to plan my life in 5-year increments, usually at any given time. So I'm actually at a very critical point in my life planning, as retirement is within my 5-year plan right now. And there's been some recent changes in life that made it go from about 4 years out to possibly less than 2 years out. So we'll see where that goes. However, one of the things that you talk about is having, your financial expectations. You talk about a 5-year, a 10-year, and a 20-year, right? So these exercises, these simple steps that you have on the next page of each one of these chapters, I'm really excited to dive a little deeper into these as I get more of a chance to, not only look at the content of the book, but really actually follow these steps. I find many of these fascinating. This is the first one that really stuck out to me because I guess maybe I was emotionally tied to it because of the way you had these increments set up. And I'm like, this is kind of how I'm already planning my own personal journey. Let me dive a little deeper. I just wanted to point that out before we go to the next chapter, which is money mindset. And money mindset is actually something that I talk about on my show quite a bit. As a matter of fact, one of my recent guests, that's part of his financial coaching, is he has these 4 different steps, and money mindset is one of the biggest ones. I'm really happy that you have a dedicated chapter in your book just to money mindset, right? And I think it's in the perfect spot where you go from your desire, belief, expectation to money mindset now, right? Now we're starting to talk about the way you think about money and how you're going to change your expectations, your belief, and your desire, right? When you think about money. So if you could dive into that a little bit, and I think you're going to quote one of your favorite books on this one.
That's right. I do open the money mindset with a quote from Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich, which was first published in 1937. Fortunes gravitate to men whose minds have been prepared to attract them just as surely as water gravitates to the ocean. End quote. And I just love this because it puts us on notice that we can attract money, but that we need to prepare our mind to do so. And when we do prepare our mind to do so, then what we are preparing it to attract is going to be as surely as water gravitates to the ocean. I mean, this is, whether you want to call it mind power law, metaphysical law, or whatever, the universe works in certain ways. And when we put certain causes into effect, they will have certain effects. And it's as sure as that rivers flow toward the ocean. And that's just a wonderful thing. Our money mindset basically is every thought and feeling that we have that has to do with money in any way, shape, or form. And so and a lot of the other chapters actually, when you're working on your desire, your belief, your expectancy, and so on, you're actually working on your mindset, right? Because that's the whole mix. But in this chapter here, we just kind of bring it all down to, like, this is what it is. This is the whole thing we're talking about in the whole book, basically, is your money mindset. It's your thoughts and feelings regarding money. And I can say, any thoughts and feelings you have money in any way, shape, or form, but I feel that requires more explanation. When I say in any way, shape, or form, I mean that not only your own money, but other people's money. How your neighbor earns money, how they spend their money, how the government uses money, corporations, taxes, all of these subjects. Now, a lot of these subjects, a lot of people have a lot of negative feelings and emotions and thoughts associated with them. And near as I can tell, a lot of that is warranted, right? The things that they don't like and the things they're griping about are true. But what they don't understand, and what we come to understand as mind power practitioners who are specifically, as a large part of what we do, trying to attract money using mind power, is that money is a subject in the subconscious mind. And everything, every thought and feeling we have affects the whole, let's call it money mindset, the whole field of energy. And so when we gripe about the way corporations take advantage of the little guy, or the banking system, or governments, or taxes, we are actually mixing a lot of emotions with the subject of money. And so we are weakening our money mindset. And I'll hasten to say, a lot of this stuff is true. Near as I can tell, what people are griping about and complaining about and getting emotionally involved with and putting a lot of mental energy on is true. But we have to understand, if we want to indulge in that type of thinking, feeling, and speaking and whatnot, and it is an indulgence, right? We're venting, we're making ourselves feel better by griping about something else. But we should do so with the understanding that we are weakening our overall ability to attract money on the whole and in general. I mean, there's, ins and outs and nothing is cut and dried. Everything has grades of color, shades of gray or whatever. But for the most part, and for the average person, you are weakening your own money mindset. You're mixing a lot of negative thoughts, ideas, feelings, images, a lot of negativity, basically, with the concept of money. That can only help you to repel money from yourself. It can't help you to attract money. So to have the strongest possible money mindset, you want to have all of your thoughts and feelings regarding money in any way, shape, or form, anybody's money coming in or going out, to be positive. That's it, to be positive. If you can't manage that, then at least neutral, like, you don't care either way. It happens, it's a fact, and you're not emotionally involved. And by all means, try to avoid having the negative emotions and feelings.
So you keep giving us these golden nuggets as we go along here, and notably when you talk about not only minding your own money, but other people's money, right? And how and the very last thing you talked about was the thoughts of money, to be positive and to avoid negativity when it comes to money. I think that's very important, because if people view money as negatively, like a lot of people like the famous saying, money is the root of all evil. That type of negative mindset when you're thinking about money and just brewing negativity towards money will not put you in a good space to actually acquire more money. Because if you think it's evil, why would you want to bring that evil into your life, right? But if you can use your money towards something positive and think of the positives it can do, not only for yourself, but if you can help others, that is something that with that money mindset, you can get yourself to bring it in abundance because you're being positive about it. So moving on to the next chapter, you talk about money goals, right? So once you have your mindset right, now you have to set the goals for yourself. And one of the things that I appreciated about this, and sometimes I have a hard time doing this myself, is setting an actual goal, a number. Like, what is that number you're looking for, right? What I like to talk about on my channel a lot is that financial freedom number. What is that amount of money you need to be making monthly to cover all of your expenses to consider yourself financially free or financially independent? So setting that number and then setting a date for that number. And I'll let you go into that a little bit, but this is one of those chapters that I definitely appreciated, because sometimes you can get lost in your own sauce, right, as you're going on and you're trying to help other people, and then you start to fall off your own wagon a little bit. So having that goal to always look to is very important.
That's right. And Well, I'll go ahead and read the quote I opened this with. This is from David J. Schwartz, The Magic of Thinking Big, 1959. I've read the book. It's been years, but it's one of the early books that I did read. Nothing happens. No forward steps are taken until a goal is established. Without goals, individuals just wander through life. They stumble along, never knowing where they are going, so they never get anywhere. And what he means by that, I think, is like important goals. Like everyone, if you get in your car to drive to work, you have the goal of getting to work. That's why you got in the car. So really, we're goal-seeking mechanisms, and we're always seeking goals. But the problem is, what goals are we seeking? Is it just getting in your car and driving to work for 30 years or whatever your working life's going to be? And I also like to tell people that, a lot of people, especially spiritually minded, metaphysically oriented people who aren't highly materially minded or motivated, they kind of shy away from actually sitting down and writing things down. Most of the teachers and writers out there who talk on the subject will tell you that they'll say something like, a goal that's not written down is just a wish, right? And so there's some truth in that. There's a lot of power in writing things down. I remember way back in the early 80s, I don't know if you've ever heard of the EST training, but it was like this seminar, consciousness evolving kind of a thing that you never heard about it unless someone told you about it. And then if you went. But it was 2 long weekends with a Wednesday in between, all day, all afternoon, all into the night, depending on the day. But one thing they had us do is to write down the goals, and in one of the exercises. And I found that notebook or whatever it was, I think it was maybe a year later, and I pulled it out and I started looking through, and like so many of the things I had written down had taken place without me giving it another thought. I remember one of them is that I had quit smoking. I had tried to quit smoking before, obviously, I was still young, and so writing things down is extremely important. But I also hasten to tell people that mind power is such a force that you can attract a lot more money into your life on a consistent basis without writing down any money goals. You have the goals of attracting more money, and you do the mind work to make that happen. But really, for people who want to be, like you say, financially free, financially independent, they want to have a very large net worth, very large monthly or yearly income, then, when you need to get a little more specific. And the great thing about goals and writing goals down is that it makes you get very specific, because, your subconscious mind and the universe are amazing mechanisms, but I think of them sometimes as being a little lazy, right? Like if I say, I want more money in my life, I want more money, and I can go out and walk in any medium-sized town or city in the United States for an hour and probably find a penny, especially if I'm in the mindset of that. And guess what? That's more money, right? So the subconscious mind / universe will take the easiest route to fulfill the letter of the word, the letter of the thing, not the spirit of it. It's kind of funny in some ways. But I've talked before about how I've gone out when I used to walk around town. I'd go out for an hour walk, and if I really had my money on it, I would find freakish amounts of money in one walk, several times, and weird things happening, like I'm going down a sidewalk and a guy with a dog is coming up the other side, and I really don't want to be, close enough to that dog to get bit because I don't know him and he looks kind of tough. So this one particular time I went around a car and there was a pile of change right outside the driver's side door. The person probably, whatever, they putting their keys in or out of their pocket. They got out of the car the night before and dropped the change. Or the traffic. If I'm crossing a main street, I remember one time, I have to wait till the traffic breaks. I'm not going to the light and waiting. I'm in the middle of a long stretch. And as soon as the traffic, I'm walking, I'm not waiting, I'm walking along. But as soon as the traffic broke, then boom, I turned and made a beeline straight for the other side. And there, right before the curb, before I step up, is either a quarter or a nickel in that instance, I think. So these weird things would happen. Not just that the money appeared or that it just happened to be there, or I would change my walk. I'd go down a different street I'd never gone on, and all of a sudden, that's where I found money. I found a couple of $5 bills folded up together one time. So freakish amounts of money that I would find. But back to the money goals, writing them down is optional, but most of the big motivational go get them people will tell you it's not. If you don't write it down, it's not a goal. But I can tell you that just having desires and belief and expectation in things happening without writing them down, they will happen. Mind power is mind power. If you were stuck on an island without a pen and a piece of paper, you can make things happen. But goal writing is an invaluable technique for really making yourself decide and become specific on what it is you want, because the universe loves specificity. More money literally can be one penny, but $10 million literally is $10 million, and that's the goal. And now the universe has that number to work with. So it's an invaluable tool, but why skip it? It's a valuable tool and it's easy to do. The hardest part is deciding what's that goal going to be, getting specific. Because to say, I want more money, that's really easy. Almost everybody will tell you that. But how much do you want monthly? How much do you want as a net worth? Oh, well, I don't know, just more. Well, if you get more specific, then the universe will get a little more serious on helping you move towards those figures.
All right, good stuff. Being more specific in your goals and just being goal oriented, that's going to help you. Again, talking about the subconscious, just give you that push subconsciously to move and gravitate towards that direction, towards that goal. Otherwise, you're just wanting more and you're not taking it seriously. As you said, right? It's not. There's nothing tangible at the end. There's nothing that you're reaching for. You're just striving for more money. One of the things that I like that you put on some of your lessons is, as you go through, like if you write down some goals, if there's things that are no longer applicable or it's changed, throw it away. Write down the new one. Keep going, right? So I definitely think that's important. And like you said, you don't have to have a specific goal. You can have several goals, right? You can say, hey, I want my net worth to be $2 million and I want to make $100,000 a year. Right, that's a specific goal, and it's something it's tangible. It's something you can strive for to achieve. And if that's something that you manifest in your mind and you keep going down that road and you keep it in your subconscious, as we talk about here, it's something that you're more likely to gravitate towards, right? And that's going to, of course, segue perfectly into your next chapter, which is Think and Results.
Hey everyone, be sure to join us next week as we continue on this journey with James Goi Jr. and we look at the mindset and the metaphysical and spiritual side of attracting money.
Thanks for listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast, your source for beating debt, saving money, and investing. Learn more at averagejoefinances.com.